This is Tornado Talk, a weekly podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenons. Share your tornado story online by email or call us toll-free 800-439-1570. That's 800-439-1570. Now, meteorologist Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday, Tornado Talk is on.
May 4th, 2007, 95% of the town of Greensburg, Kansas was destroyed by an EF5 tornado.
How the night unfolded, what storm spotters witnessed, well-worded tornado warnings that saved lives, how the town had to start over again, and what Greensburg, Kansas looks like today.
We talk with storm chasers Darren Brunin.
Just put my hand on my chest, once we started rolling into the town. Really not here. Look at disbelief.
And Dick McGowan.
And we see a man waving his arms for help, and we can see his house has been totally damaged.
Mike Umscheid at the National Weather Service.
The velocity signature was not only maintaining itself, it was just growing in size and taking on a signature that, quite frankly, I'd never seen before.
Superintendent of Kiowa County, Kansas Schools, Darren Hedrick, talks about Greensburg going green.
What do we need to invest so that long term we see a better return? And so that's kind of the focus we had with everything we did that was, you would call green, but I wouldn't call it green. I would just call it a wise investment in our future.
And Greensburg City Administrator Kyler Ludwig moves to Kansas and brings along new ideas.
And the challenges that Greensburg's facing are challenges that most communities won't face for another 20 plus years.
Welcome to episode 2 of Tornado Talk, our tribute to the people of Greensburg, Kansas. Severe weather broke out the evening of May 4th, 2007. Little did we know it would produce one of the most devastating twisters in Kansas history. 11 people died and 60 more were injured.
And it all started with this.
The National Weather Service in Dodge City has issued a tornado warning for Kiowa County in south-central Kansas until 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. At 9:17 p.m. Central Daylight Time, National Weather Service meteorologists were tracking a confirmed large and extremely dangerous tornado 14 miles south of Greensburg, or 11 miles northwest of Wilmore, moving northeast at 25 miles an hour. Locations impacted include Greensburg and rural residences of eastern Kiowa County. If you are in the path of this destructive tornado, take cover immediately in a basement or other underground shelter.
Mike Umscheid was given the duty to issue warnings at the National Weather Service in Dodge City.
The way we divvied up the responsibilities, I was going to be the one issuing the primary warnings for that night. And we first were watching storms developing in northwest Oklahoma, and then the northernmost storm from that small cluster started to move up into our CWA about 50, 60 miles south of Dodge City. And at about 7 or 7:30 in the evening, that particular storm started to develop really telltale supercell signatures on radar. And within no time, it started to develop a really strong mid-level rotation. And given the environment, we had pretty good anticipation that if something were to go through the cap, the thermodynamic and the wind fields were just incredible.
Storm chase partners Darren Brunin and Dick McGowan were watching for storms to form and didn't know if they would. We asked Darren what he remembered before it all happened.
Realistically, at about sunset, we were talking to one of the chasers, and we said, well, looks like, today's a bust, and we're about ready to give up. And then I'd say 20 minutes later is when, that storm really fired and really started to strengthen and then turned into what it did.
Dick McGowan told us they could have been in a different part of the state since tornadoes that day were possible in both the northern and southern part of the state.
We were debating in St. John's, Kansas, whether to go north or south because the surface low was up north, the dry land was further south. After much debate, we went to the southern target and watched these 3 storms go up that were pretty weak at the time. And then, I don't know, I guess you could just say I don't know what happened, but just pure chaos ensued after that. And it happened really fast. There were 3 supercells lined up. One was an anticyclonic left split, and it took off north at 50, but it was pretty obvious the southern one was going to take over. So we were in Coldwater, Kansas, when this Greensburg supercell was beginning to explode, and we could see this inflow band from Coldwater all the way screaming west into it to Sitka, and we could already see two distinctive what they call occlusions, tornadic occlusions developing. One was like an older one to the west, and one was like a rapidly new wall cloud to the east. And the one to the west eventually put down this big tornado, I think what they call a stovepipe. It was probably about a quarter mile wide. It was straight up and down, and it lasted for a long time. I know it did some damage somewhere there north of Sitka along the highway. But then we were focused more on the one to the east because it was really wrapping up. And it would seem like a matter of seconds. Went from a wall cloud to a full-grown tornado stovepipe within a few matter of minutes, just right in front of us as it crosses the road just north of Coldwater, Kansas. We continued north out of Coldwater, and there were a bunch of other chasers there, but what happened is the road went from pavement immediately to mud from previous rains there, and we're in my 2003 Toyota Camry, and we don't have four-wheel drive, and it's sliding back and forth. I can barely do 20 miles an hour, and by this time it's dusk, and the tornado we can only see between lightning flashes just to our east, and it's growing every lightning flash from a simple little cone to a stovepipe. Now it's to a full-blown wedge within 3 minutes later, and we're trying to keep up with it. The tornado's not moving too fast. It's probably moving the same speed we are, so we're keeping relatively even with it just to the west, and it's moving northeast. And each lightning flash, it gets bigger and bigger.
At the Dodge City National Weather Service office, Mike Umscheid was making quick decisions based on Darren and Dick's reports and what was on radar.
It was probably about 15 to 20 minutes before Greensburg got hit that I was really starting to get concerned and just anxious, because with each successive volume scan, the velocity signature was not only maintaining itself, it was just growing in size and taking on a signature that, quite frankly, I'd never seen before. Typically, we look for these gate-to-gate couplets. Well, this wasn't a gate-to-gate couplet. It was just this giant, 100-knot inbound, 100-knot outbound circulation that's just, a mile and a half in diameter. And it was moving more towards the north with time in the direction of Greensburg. And it was about, again, 10 to 15 minutes before when we really started to get really concerned and just anxiety, and we just tried to pump up the wording in our products. And with all the storm chaser and spider reports of this just giant, lightning illuminated tornado, it was just getting pretty anxious in the office. And with one of our bigger towns in our CWA immediately, downstream, it was just. It was very anxious times.
Within this monster, there's these satellite tornadoes that you see in each flash that are significant tornadoes that are, you see one lightning flash, you'll see one over here, and then the next lightning flash, you'll see another one over there to the right. And there are literally at 1.5 significant tornadoes on the ground at once, besides the parent tornado, which is over a mile wide, approaching Greensburg. Something I've never seen, and I hope I never see again, because I can only imagine the amount of chasers that would have been east of or south of the main tornado and been hit by a satellite. And one of the satellites, I believe, is rated an EF5 south of town. Well, we're continuing on this road, and it's white knuckle the whole way. I think I'm going to die the whole time because I can see the old tornado to the west, and it's getting closer to us.
As we were following the tornado, we got on muddy roads. We were trying to deal with that, and then also watching the tornado growing bigger and bigger and bigger.
And it's this mud road, and it makes a hard right turn on the county line road of Kiowa County. And then we cross the damage path, and it's significant. And there's power lines down. And boy, when we hit that pavement, it was like being at sea for 2 years. And hitting dry land, you're just like, oh, thank God I'm on pavement. And then we headed north, and Darren's doing live phone with KAKE television there in Wichita.
You're dealing with that, but at the same time, you had to stay composed, being on air and not let, your surroundings take you away from doing what you had to do to give people warning by reporting the tornado.
And he's telling the Jay Prater that the tornado is over a mile wide, and that's being conservative. And at that point, we were probably about 5 miles south of it on the county line, and we're driving north, and we see a man waving his arms for help, and we can see his house has been totally like damaged. And he gets in, and his name is Daniel. He was a Mennonite guy there. He said he had gone take a shower downstairs, heard it hailing, and then next thing he knew, his house was gone. So we picked him up, and he's worried about his family, which is west of Greensburg. And it looked like the tornado might miss Greensburg to the east, but then it made a hard left turn. What they do often when you have significant tornadoes, they'll when they occlude, when the RFE starts to wrap fully around, they'll steer the tornado more northward. In this case, it steered it right into Greensburg, and completely demolished the entire town. What I can only imagine what it felt like to be there.
And then just put my hand on my chest, once we started rolling into the town. It was another, look at disbelief.
It's really hard for me to talk about this day. I've tried to put it out of my mind, kind of repress it in the back of my head because of the aftermath that I can never really unsee. And I went through a lot of, kind of post-traumatic, kind of, after everything wore off, it kind of hit me, and I felt kind of guilty. And it's been really hard to talk about this day, especially with the aftermath and wanting to help and find more people and thinking I could have done more and stuff like that. But we did search and rescue inside Greensburg for 3 or 4 hours. We didn't find anybody. We did help the fire department and other emergency managers go house to house, sweeping the west side of Greensburg. And it was actually truly amazing to see how many people were walking out. I mean, you couldn't make out anything in the town. The only thing you could make out in town was between the lightning strikes, and you could just see a flash of just rubble. You couldn't tell what were streets. Couldn't tell what was, cars. All you could hear car alarms going off, the smell of gas, screaming, the smell of tree, like fresh pine. It's really hard to put into words what it's like to see a whole entire town of 1,200 people completely gone. Because I grew up in a town that was 1,200 people, and it was just completely gone. And the only way you could tell was between lightning strikes from the storm as it's passing of where the damage was. But from as far as you could see, it was just rubble. And there were so many people walking around that were. It just looked like they had like there were zombies. Like they were confused. They all had the same facial expression, and they were just walking, and they didn't know where they were walking to. They were just walking west. Before we started talking to them and telling them that, the command center's in the center part of town. But it was just like they had this confusion and this look on their face that I'll never forget it. And every time I come upon damage like that, they have that same facial expression. It's just something you never want to actually take camera to and show.
Storm chasers, much like Dick and Darren, and today's technology have improved the warning time that Mike Umscheid and the team at the National Weather Service in Dodge City were able to provide that night.
We had that first tornado warning out a good hour and a half before Greensburg was even hit.
Mike Umscheid did an excellent job. He had a split-second decision what to do, is this tornado going to hit Greensburg? We're getting reports. We actually are reporting it on Spotter Network too, as well as through KKTV. Do I hit the button? Is it going to miss Greensburg? It's better be safe than sorry. And he really did help save a whole lot of lives that day. People actually told Darren that when they heard him say it was over a mile wide, that they actually took cover.
With all the negative that occurred that night in Greensburg, Kansas, we asked Dick if there was something positive that came out of it.
The guy who picked up the name was Daniel. I haven't been in touch with him recently, but we went and visited them back on July 4th of 2007, 2 months exactly to the day. And we rode around, and before we got there, before we met up with Daniel, we were in this tent, because that's all they had really in Greensburg for a 4th of July party. And of course it storms, and the wind is about to blow this tent over, and we hear somebody say, "God hates Greensburg." But after the storm is done, and it's almost sunset, the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen is like projected over Greensburg, but within this rubble and stuff. But this guy, Daniel, he took us around, and he actually got to talk to President Bush. And President Bush said, do you have your family? He said, yes. He says, do you have your God? He says, yes. He said, well, that's all you need then. I'll never forget what he said to me. So to be able to talk with Daniel a couple months later and, you know, talk about how crazy that night was and how thankful we both were for each other, and it really helped out a lot.
What is your tornado tale? If you have a story you'd like to share, call us toll-free 800-439-1570. That's 800-439-1570.
Darren Hedrick is the superintendent of schools in Kiowa County, Kansas, where Greensburg is located. Where were you during the late evening of May 4th, 2007?
That evening, we just returned from a track meet in a town next to us, and came home, and we knew storms were in the area, and so doing the typical things, you know, putting cars in garages, putting things away. We knew there'd be some rain, possibly hail, and just trying to take care of things that way. And while we were doing that, have a neighbor, a good friend of mine, that was out doing the same thing, and so my wife and I, we went over to their home just to visit, and that's where we were, next door, the evening of the tornado.
It is a devastating event, an EF5 tornado, and approximately 95% of the town is leveled, and the community joins together to rebuild. How did the idea of rebuilding Greensburg as a green town come about?
I think that rebuilding talk, as far as rebuilding green, as far as that's not a conversation that happens real quickly. I think it's one that takes time for people to think about and to analyze and look at what the options are. I tend to look at our rural community, as most rural communities in the country are. We're real similar to businesses. And in our particular town, we had an aging population with declining numbers. You know, our population was moving away more than moving in. School was getting a little bit smaller through time. We had businesses that through time were moving away. We had less businesses on Main Street. So really, we were a typical rural community that kind of dying a slow death. And so when you look at that and you look at rebuilding, if you rebuild exactly what you had the way you had it, you're destined for the same kind of future you were seeing. And for us, if your future wasn't looking real bright, to replicate that probably wasn't the most prudent thing to do. And so we tried to look at it from a perspective of we didn't want to just survive the tornado, but try to put ourselves in a position that maybe we could thrive after the tornado. And so we had conversations of, you know, when we build it back, what can we do that maybe improves our chances of having a little bit of success? What improves the chances that people want to move back, that they want to move here for the first time? And through those conversations, I think we started looking at what options we had. If you drive down the highway, you go by small town after small town after small town, and for the most part, they're all basically the same. And we thought if we wanted people to come to our community, what could we do that would maybe give them a different option? What could we do that maybe would attract them to us as opposed to somebody else? And so through those conversations, we landed on being a little bit more green, I guess you'd call it. But really, we just thought about building smart, building for long term, being sustainable, looking at life cycle costs of buildings as opposed to upfront construction costs. So that's kind of how we started the conversation.
When people hear the idea of going green, you know, people have all kinds of different ideas. Did you have any pushback? I mean, you're in a fairly conservative part of the country. Did you have any pushback, or people are like, what are you talking about here? How is this entire idea received initially?
Yeah, and I think with anytime you look at changing something, there's going to be some pushback. And so the idea that there wasn't anyone opposed to it, I think would not be a truthful statement. But I simply look at it from a perspective, if I'm going to go buy windows for a home, or I'm going to build a new home and insulate it, or put in appliances, I'm going to look at things that over the long term are the best thing for me financially. I want efficient windows and doors and an insulated home with a good roof. I want Energy Star appliances. I want things that over time are going to save me money. And so I think a lot of times people hear green, they think of something that's going to be expensive. I think it's kind of the opposite. We didn't do anything that we didn't think had a financial payoff that that would have some kind of a pop for us over time. And so, we have geothermal wells, heat pumps to heat and cool the building. You look at what the cost is to put that in as opposed to traditional heating and cooling, and you say, okay, we're going to be in the building for 50 years. Let's take the cost of the product plus the cost of maintaining it for 50 years, and then compare that to the traditional things, and then you just see which one's better for you over time. Mm-hmm. And I think we try to do that with everything we did in the community, no matter what we were building, no matter what technology we're putting in, and no matter what green feature we looked at. We tried to make sure we looked at it from a life cycle, long-term perspective. And it's really easy for us to sell that to our community members. We're in a farming-based community, and so my board members, several of them are farmers, and they know it costs money to put seed in the ground. And they know when they harvest the crop, they're going to get money for how much they harvest. They also know sometimes if you invest a little bit extra money up front, not only put the seed in the ground, but fertilize it and put water on it and do all things that cost you some money up front. Mm-hmm. They also know that they're going to get a higher yield and there's a payback in the end. Well, just like you do that with farming, you can do the same thing in construction. You got to look at what it costs you to build it, but not just build it. What do we need to invest so that long term we see a better return? And so that's kind of the focus we had with everything we did that was, you would call green, but I wouldn't call it green. I would just call it a wise investment in our future.
So a nonprofit is formed by Daniel Wallach, and it's called Greensburg Greentown, and the reconstruction begins. What are some examples of the new buildings that have been constructed?
We're a small community. We're not even 1,000 people yet after the rebuild. But if you were to come into our town, we have the highest number of LEED Platinum sustainable buildings in probably the world per capita. So you got a LEED Platinum school. The city buildings the same way. The county courthouse is that way. The hospital we have in town is a platinum building. Most of our public structures, the Big Well tourist place, the art center we have in town, the incubator office buildings or startup spaces downtown, most everything is built to some form of LEED standard. And so most all the public spaces are really sustainable and really efficient. And privately, there's a number of private individuals that have put some of that technology into their buildings. And then there's just a lot of houses that have been built that are built just like they are in any other town. But I would just challenge people to not admit that when they build a new home, whether it's in Greensburg or anywhere in the country, everyone looks at things to make their house tighter, more energy efficient, so they can maintain low utilities and low maintenance over the long term of that particular facility.
Any other programs or successes you'd like to share with us?
As far as programs, the city, we had our own power plant. We had the ability to produce our own power, and obviously the city would do that whenever there was high peak days, and it was cheaper to produce it than it was to buy it off the grid. And after the tornado took out the big diesel engines that the power plant had. And since then, the city has put in a wind farm, their own little private wind farm, and they produce about 3 times more power than the city requires. And so 100% of our electricity in town is totally green, and the rest of that they sell out on the grid. And so we're 100% renewable with our power in town. Here at the school, we have a 50-kilowatt tower that is the number 1 producing kilowatt tower in the world last year. Pretty proud of that. We capture rainwater and use it to irrigate our facilities, so we have that takes place. Gee whiz, what else? Just a lot of, we're LEED Platinum buildings, so there's lots of cool things in the facility. But it's a nice place to live. Our school is state-of-the-art. We've got the newest and best technologies there are, and we've got great staff working in our facility. So we feel pretty pleased about where we were and where we've came to. And it's been a long journey, but it's been a good journey. It's been one that we can look back on and feel really good about things.
The story of Greensburg attracted a lot of media. There have been several books written, and also there was a TV show, The Idea, from the Discovery Channel, and that grabbed the attention of Leonardo DiCaprio, and his company produced the show, correct?
Correct.
What was it like to be a part of a production like that?
There's advantages from a lot of perspectives. One advantage is when you have publicity like that and you have some attention, you tend to have a couple more options than other places have. People want to invest in your community. So publicity is good from an investment perspective. It allows us to maybe do a few other things that we wouldn't be able to do typically. So that was good. We kind of looked at it from a school perspective. We look at it from a different angle a little bit. And we had a whole different workforce in our community for a year that we'd never seen before. We had camera people, sound people, producers. We had all kinds of people that made a living making documentaries, making shows. And they were doing that in our community and in our school. And it exposed our kids to a whole different world of potential and what they can be and where they can live. And it opened their eyes to possibilities. So a lot of times kids only know what their parents do or what their friends' families do or what they see around them. And in a rural community that's basically farming and a hospital and a school and a few other businesses, it's nice to have those other opportunities come in and enlighten your kids. And our kids really gained a lot from that.
So I recently learned that the Greensburg Greentown is actually shutting its doors as a nonprofit. And with that coming to an end, where do you think that leaves Greensburg and the initiative moving forward with being more of an energy efficient town? I like how you describe, because green has such a negative connotation, but I love how you've described it. But where do you think that leaves the town moving forward?
Well, the fact that Greensburg and we have recovered and are where we are today, there's not a lot of that has anything to do with Greensburg Greentown, the tourist stop or the tours that took place in town. I mean, all the wonderful things that took place and all the things that happened within this community are about the people that lived here then, the people that live here now, and all the work that they went in and did. And I just applaud all the people that have gone through the process and all the people that have invested, their lives in rebuilding the community. And though it's unfortunate that Greensburg Greentown is closing their doors as far as that information center for how we rebuilt green, it doesn't change what we've done and what we continue to do. And we still have tours every day, not every day now as much as it was, but it's not unusual to have people come by and want to hear the story and want to tour the facilities, want to come through the school, want to learn what we did, how we did it, why we did it, and try to take those kinds of things back to their communities and to their homes and try to implement some of them. Because I think we have a good story to tell, but more importantly than the story to tell, we have a good example of what can be successful and how you can take a bad situation and really turn it into a very good situation and one that our kids and the people that live here are going to benefit from for generations to come. And so that's a legacy that we feel really good about.
Darren, you were awesome. You were awesome. Thank you. So that's my last question for you. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
It's like I said, it's a nice place. It's a great community. It's one that continues to this day to struggle a little bit. And we're always going to struggle because we're a rural community. And we're just fighting that fight every day to try to make sure we provide the very best we can for everyone that lives here and makes this their home, and that will continue to be our challenge.
What is your tornado tale? If you have a story you'd like to share, call us toll-free, 800-439-1570. That's 800-439-1570.
We're joined now by Kyler Ludwig, the city administrator of Greensburg. But unlike Superintendent Hedrick, he hasn't always lived there.
Kyler and his family moved from Utah, and he joins us. Kyler, what were your first impressions of Greensburg?
The first time I drove into Greensburg, I was blown away by how well planned it was. And you go down Main Street, and they have a beautiful Main Street with purple sage and trees. It really is eye-catching anymore, and if you were here 9 years ago, you'd have no idea that you were even in the same city. Even longer, I mean, the Greensburg is a very different city from what it was before the tornado. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a really unique opportunity. It's an absolutely gorgeous place to be.
How do you see that infrastructure staying protected and preserved?
Yeah, one of the challenges that we've had is right after this tornado, you have a sprint to get everything back to a place where you can have people living in the city. And it really was an awful lot of work. The community had to come together, put a lot of time in, And I describe it as a sprint because it was building after building coming in, infrastructure being built. And today, when you're managing a city, when you're managing a town, you're running a marathon. And so it's trying to get to a pace that we can sustain this for a long time, which means slowing down just a little bit and making sure that we're going the right direction. And that's been a great challenge, not only that I faced, but people before me. It's let's get this pace set and do little things that are green, sustainable, to keep that culture here.
Do you have any examples of maybe some programs that will be instituted to help protect that culture you're talking about?
Yeah, because originally some of the things that they were able to do were some large pieces of infrastructure, some large LEED buildings. Today we don't have the funding to do that. We don't have insurance funding. We don't have a lot of attention here in our town. So it's what can we do that we can sustain ourselves? And an example that was just passed that we'll be implementing this summer is a free bike program. And we're going to have bikes here in town that residents and tourists can come and use the bike and see the town from a unique perspective. And things like that are a green way to move around town. You don't have to get in your car and drive around.
Any other programs or anything else you'd like to add here, Kyler? This has been great.
One of the real challenges that I see is building up our tree canopy again. Greensburg's tree canopy was devastated, and it's a slow process to try and build that back up. And the best day to plant a tree would have been 20 years ago. In Greensburg's case, 9 years ago. But the best we can do is plant one today. And so we're looking at, we work with a tree board. We were just given the designation of Tree City USA once again. Planting up that tree canopy is so important for a community because it livens it up. It brings life to a community.
So you think you're going to stick around for a while?
Absolutely. You know, it's one of those things when you move from town to town, and I've been in a few here in Kansas, you learn to like some things, and you learn that there's maybe some things that you don't like in towns. But both me and my wife have absolutely fallen in love with Greensburg. And it's not just the community, the infrastructure, and the green that brought us here. When you come here, the community is a community that really had to come together, and I think they've really stayed close-knit. I think there's probably more citizen panels or public committees and boards per capita here in Greensburg than in any community in the country. That makes my job easier, and so I really like that.
Thank you for joining us, Kyler Ludwig, the new city administrator in Greensburg, Kansas.
Jen, you know, there's a book called Out of All Bad Comes Good, and it made me think of this. I wanted to tell you about the organization that Darren Brunin, who we heard from earlier, founded, called Storm Assist, and why he brought it to life.
Seeing tornado devastation, quite a bit is obviously, a motivator, and that big factor, that you see people, you want to, afterward, you say, I wonder what I could do to help these people out, and, the eventual conclusion is organize something and have a structured organization to do that such things. But also, it was a big factor. In 2009, I lost, pretty much everything in a fire. Could really, after that happened, relate to what people go through after they lose everything in a tornado or other natural disaster. So it became something that I felt that people helped me out a lot when I was in that situation, and it's only right that others are there to help others out when they're in those situations. So for that reason, Storm Assist was brought forth, and we're now moving forward with it.
If you have a moment, please visit their website. It's a collaborative effort by storm chasers, and they provide aid to communities directly impacted by damaging weather events, and that includes storm victims and even their pets. StormAssist.org. You can donate by purchasing weather calendars, storm DVDs, shirts, and stickers.
Wonderful organization. Jen, next week we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the movie Twister.
Get underground! Take cover right now!
We talk Bill Paxton, we talk Helen Hunt, and we talk Dorothy. Plus, your phone calls, too. We'd love to hear your tornado tales, so you can sort of interact with us on this at 800-439-1570. That is 800-439-1570. It is a 20-year way back to Waukita trip. Episode 3 is all Twister.
This has been Tornado Talk, powered by thestormreport.com.